The last will. The envelope trembled in Eleanor's weathered hands as she stared at her son's familiar handwriting one last time. For Mom. Open only after my death. James had pressed it into her palm 3 weeks ago, his eyes holding a weight she'd never seen before, not even during his cancer diagnosis. Promise me, he had whispered, his voice already weakening. Promise you'll do exactly what it says, no matter how hard it gets. Now, sitting in the sterile quiet of her kitchen, while Sophia sobbed theatrically in the living room, Eleanor broke the seal. The letter inside made her blood freeze. Mom, I know what I'm about to tell you will shock you. I've changed my will. Everything, the house, both cars, the savings account, goes to you, not Sophia. She doesn't know, and she can't know until after the reading. I need you to be strong for Lucas. There are things about Sophia that I discovered too late, things that would destroy our family if they came out now. But I won't let my son suffer for my mistakes. The lawyer has all the details. Trust no one else with this information. I love you. James. Eleanor's hands shook as she reread the words. 26 years of marriage, and James had left his wife nothing? Her mind raced back to recent months, to Sophia's increasingly frequent girls' nights, the new clothes that appeared without explanation, the way she'd avoided eye contact during James's final weeks. A crash from the living room jolted her back to the present. Sophia's voice carried through the walls, sharp and angry rather than grief-stricken. No, Marcus, I can't talk about that now. He just died, for God's sakes. A pause. Tomorrow? Are you insane? The funeral is tomorrow. Eleanor crept closer to the doorway, her heart hammering. Who was Marcus? Fine, but after the will reading. Once I know where we stand financially, we can figure out our next move. Another pause. Then Sophia's voice dropped to a venomous whisper. Of course I still want to be with you. James dying doesn't change that. If anything, it makes everything easier. The words hit Eleanor like a physical blow. She pressed herself against the wall, struggling to breathe. Her daughter-in-law, the woman she'd welcomed into her family, had helped raise her grandson, was talking about her dead son's funeral as an inconvenience, talking about moving on as if James had been nothing more than an obstacle. Footsteps approached, and Eleanor hurried back to the kitchen, shoving the letter deep into her purse. Sophia appeared in the doorway, her makeup perfectly reapplied, tears nowhere to be found. Eleanor, I think I'll stay at my sister's tonight. This house, it's just too painful. She gathered her designer handbag, the same one Eleanor had noticed was far too expensive for their family budget, and drove away without a backward glance. She wasn't heading toward her sister's house. She was going in the opposite direction entirely. That night, Eleanor couldn't sleep. She sat at her kitchen table with a cup of cold coffee, staring at James's letter. Her phone buzzed with a text from her 9-year-old grandson. Grandma, where's Mom? Dad's gone and now she's gone too. I'm scared. Eleanor's heart shattered. She texted back, I'm coming to get you right now, sweetheart. You're staying with me tonight. When she arrived at James and Sophia's house, soon to be her house, according to the will, she found Lucas alone, still in his school clothes from the day before. The refrigerator was nearly empty, and dirty dishes filled the sink. How long had Sophia been neglecting him? Mom said she had to go handle some business about Dad, Lucas said quietly as Eleanor held him. But she was crying weird, like she was mad instead of sad. Eleanor's jaw clenched. Even a 9-year-old could see through Sophia's act. Pack some clothes, honey. You're staying with Grandma for a while. As Lucas gathered his belongings, Eleanor made a decision that would change everything. She pulled out her phone and began taking pictures. The empty fridge, the dirty house, the unpaid bills scattered on the counter. If James had left everything to her to protect Lucas, then she needed to be prepared for war. The funeral the next day was a masterclass in deception. Sophia arrived 20 minutes late, dressed in a black designer dress that Eleanor was certain she'd never seen before. She sobbed beautifully for the cameras, clutched Lucas with theatrical desperation, and played the grieving widow to perfection. But Eleanor watched everything. She saw Sophia check her phone during the eulogy. She noticed the man in the back row who kept making eye contact with her daughter-in-law. She watched Sophia's reaction when their pastor spoke about the sanctity of marriage and how death couldn't break the bonds of true love. A flash of something that looked suspiciously like guilt. After the service, as people offered condolences, Eleanor overheard Sophia whispering to someone on her phone. Thursday at 2. Yes, the will reading. No, she doesn't suspect anything. The old woman thinks I'm devastated. The old woman. Eleanor's blood boiled, but she maintained her composure. Let Sophia think she was just a harmless, grieving mother. It would make what came next so much more satisfying. Thursday arrived gray and cold, matching Eleanor's mood perfectly. The lawyer's office smelled of old leather and secrets. Sophia sat beside Eleanor, fidgeting with her wedding ring. The same ring she'd been conspicuously not wearing at the funeral. Before we begin, the lawyer said, adjusting his glasses, I want to note that James made some significant changes to his will just 6 weeks before his death. He was very specific about these modifications and insisted they remained confidential until today. Eleanor felt Sophia tense beside her. Good. Let her worry. The will is quite straightforward, the lawyer continued. To my beloved mother, Eleanor Morrison, I leave my house at 412 Maple Street, both vehicles, and the entirety of my savings and checking accounts, totaling approximately $340,000. The silence in the room was deafening. I could hear Sophia's sharp intake of breath, could feel the shock radiating from her like heat. I'm sorry. Sophia's voice cracked. There must be a mistake. What about me? What about Lucas? The lawyer consulted his papers. There is a provision for Lucas. A college fund was established in his name to be managed by his grandmother. As for you, Mrs. Morrison, James left you his personal effects and a letter. Sophia's face had gone white, then red, then an alarming shade of purple. This is impossible. We were married for 26 years. He couldn't just cut me out. I'm afraid he could, and he did, the lawyer said gently. The will is legally binding and witnessed properly. However, there is this letter for you. With shaking hands, Sophia opened the envelope. Eleanor watched her face transform as she read. Confusion giving way to understanding, then to pure, undiluted panic. Sophia, Eleanor could read over her shoulder. I know about Marcus. I know about the credit cards you opened in my name. I know about the money you've been taking from Lucas's original college fund. I know about the house you two looked at in Colorado. I've known for months. I didn't confront you because I was dying, and I wanted to spend my remaining time with my son, not fighting. But I won't let you destroy his future the way you've tried to destroy our marriage. Everything goes to my mother because she will protect Lucas. You've shown me exactly who you are, Sophia. Now deal with the consequences. James. Sophia crumpled the letter, her hands shaking with rage. He can't do this to me. I gave him the best years of my life. Apparently, he disagreed. Eleanor said quietly, speaking for the first time since arriving. You poisoned him against me, didn't you? Filled his head with lies. I didn't need to fill his head with anything. You did that all by yourself. Eleanor stood, her voice gaining strength. Did you really think no one would notice? The expensive clothes, the mysterious phone calls, the way you disappeared whenever James needed you most? You have no idea what you're talking about. Marcus. Eleanor said simply. Sophia's face went dead white. How do you... I know a lot of things, Sophia. I know you've been planning to leave for months. I know you've been stealing from your own son's future. I know you couldn't even pretend to grieve properly at your husband's funeral. Eleanor's voice was steel now. What I want to know is why. Why betray a man who loved you? Why abandon your son when he needs you most? Sophia's mask finally slipped completely. Because I was dying in that house. 26 years of playing the perfect wife, the perfect mother, while James worked his boring job and talked about retirement plans and college funds. Do you know what that's like? To feel your life slipping away day by day? To know you're wasting your prime years on someone who couldn't even make partner at his firm? James was diagnosed with cancer, and your first thought was about your prime years? I didn't know he was sick when I met Marcus, and by the time James told us about the cancer, I was already in love, real love, not the settled, boring love I had with James. Marcus makes me feel alive again. And Lucas, what about your son? Sophia's laugh was bitter. Lucas will be fine. He's always preferred you anyway. At least now he can live with someone who actually wants him around. The cruelty of it took Eleanor's breath away. This woman had given birth to Lucas, had held him as a baby, had been trusted with his heart, and she was discarding him like an unwanted accessory? Get out, Eleanor whispered. What? Get out of this office. Get out of my son's house. Get out of our lives. Eleanor's voice was trembling with fury. Take your boyfriend and your designer clothes and your lies and get out. You can't throw me out. I have rights. Actually, the lawyer interjected quietly, the house legally belongs to Mrs. Morrison now. She can absolutely ask you to leave. Sophia looked around the room wildly as if seeking allies. Finding none, she grabbed her purse and stood. Fine, but don't think this is over. I'll fight this will. I'll take you to court. With what money? Eleanor asked calmly. James closed all your joint accounts 2 weeks ago. The credit cards you opened illegally are maxed out, and I'm pretty sure Marcus isn't going to fund your legal battle when he finds out you're not getting any inheritance money. For the first time, Sophia looked truly afraid. You don't understand. I have nothing without this money. Nothing. Then you should have thought about that before you cheated on your dying husband. Sophia stumbled toward the door, then turned back one last time. James was weak. He was boring and weak, and settling for him was the biggest mistake of my life. At least now I'm free to be with someone who actually excites me. Eleanor stood and walked to the door, holding it open. James was brave enough to face his cancer without falling apart. He was strong enough to protect his son even from his deathbed. He was loyal and kind and honorable. You're right about one thing, though. Settling for him was a mistake. He deserved so much better than you. After Sophia left, Eleanor sat alone with the lawyer, signing papers that would secure Lucas's future. Her phone buzzed with a text from her grandson. Grandma, can we have pizza tonight? And can I sleep in Uncle James's old room? Mom's room smells like her perfume, and it makes me sad. Uncle James. Lucas had started calling his father that since the diagnosis, unable to process that daddies could die. Eleanor's heart ached as she typed back, Of course, sweetheart. We can do whatever you want. Over the following weeks, Eleanor watched Sophia's carefully constructed life crumble from afar. The expensive apartment she'd rented with Marcus became unaffordable without James's income. The credit card company started calling. The boyfriend, faced with supporting a woman with no money and a reputation for infidelity, suddenly became much less attentive. Sophia tried to fight the will, but her lawyer dropped her when she couldn't pay her retainer. She tried to claim emotional distress and abandonment, but James's detailed documentation of her affair made her case hopeless. She even tried to manipulate Lucas, calling him with tearful apologies and promises to fix everything. But Eleanor had prepared her grandson for this. "Mom sounds different," Lucas told Eleanor after one of these calls. "She's pretending to be sorry, but isn't really." Eleanor marveled at her grandson's wisdom. Children, she'd learned, were far better at seeing through deception than adults. They hadn't yet learned to make excuses for inexcusable behavior. 3 months after the will reading, Sophia made one final attempt at reconciliation. She appeared on Eleanor's doorstep, looking haggard and desperate. "Please, I know I made mistakes, but I'm Lucas's mother. You can't keep him from me forever." Eleanor looked at this woman who had once been like a daughter to her and felt only pity. "I'm not keeping him from you, Sophia. You're the one who chose Marcus over your son. You're the one who abandoned him when his father died. You're the one who called him an inconvenience." "I never said that." "You said James dying made everything easier. You said you needed space to process your husband's death. You left a 9-year-old boy alone in an empty house while you ran off to plan your new life." Eleanor's voice was calm but implacable. "James doesn't want to see you, Sophia. That's his choice, not mine. He's a child. He doesn't understand." "He understands more than you think. He understands that you disappeared when he needed you most. He understands that you never came to his school play or his baseball games even before James got sick. He understands that when he cries for his daddy, you get annoyed instead of comforting him." Sophia's face crumpled. "I know I haven't been perfect, but I can change. I can be better." "Can you? Can you love Lucas more than you love yourself? Can you put his needs before your own? Can you be the mother he deserves instead of the mother you want to be?" The silence stretched between them, and Eleanor saw the answer in Sophia's eyes before she spoke. I don't know how to be that person," she whispered. "I've tried, but I don't know how to." For the first time since this nightmare began, Eleanor felt a flicker of sympathy for her former daughter-in-law. "Then the kindest thing you can do is let him go. Let him grow up with people who can love him the way he deserves." Sophia left that day and never came back. Eleanor heard through mutual friends that she'd moved to Colorado with Marcus, that they'd gotten married in a small ceremony with no family present. She heard that Sophia had started telling people she'd never had children, that her past life was too painful to discuss.
Lucas grieved for the mother he'd lost, but it was a different kind of grief than what he felt for his father. James' death was a tragedy, but Sophia's abandonment was a choice. Eleanor helped him understand the difference, helped him see that losing someone to death was painful but natural, while losing someone to selfishness was painful but not his fault. A year after James' death, Eleanor stood in the kitchen of what had once been her son's house, watching Lucas help her make breakfast. He'd grown taller, his face had lost some of its childhood roundness, but his smile was still pure joy when he successfully flipped a pancake. "Grandma," he said thoughtfully, "do you think Dad knew Mom would leave?" Eleanor considered her answer carefully. "I think your dad knew a lot of things. That's why he made sure you'd always be taken care of. I miss him. I miss him too, sweetheart. Every single day. But I'm glad I have you." Eleanor pulled her grandson into a fierce hug, thinking of James's letter, of his final act of love and protection. "You'll always have me, Lucas. I promise." Later that evening, after Lucas was asleep, Eleanor sat in her son's old chair and pulled out a photo album. Pictures of James as a baby, as a toddler, on his wedding day with a radiant Sophia, holding newborn Lucas with tears of joy streaming down his face. She paused at a picture from last Christmas, James thin from chemotherapy, but smiling as he watched Lucas open presents, Sophia in the background checking her phone. Had she known even then? Had she been texting Marcus while her husband was dying just a few feet away? Eleanor closed the album and walked to her bedroom where Lucas's sleeping form was barely visible under a mountain of blankets. Tomorrow was Saturday, and they had plans to visit James's grave, then go to Lucas's baseball game, then maybe see a movie. Simple plans, the kind James had always loved. In the distance, a car drove by with music playing too loud, and Eleanor was reminded of Sophia's dramatic exit from the lawyer's office. She wondered if her former daughter-in-law ever thought about what she'd given up, if she ever regretted choosing temporary passion over permanent love. Then she decided she didn't care. Some people were worth fighting for. Some people were worth protecting. And some people, no matter how much you once loved them, weren't worth a moment's additional thought. James had known the difference. In his final weeks, facing his own mortality, he'd seen clearly what mattered and what didn't. His son mattered. His son's future mattered. His son's happiness mattered more than preserving the illusion of a perfect marriage. Eleanor pulled the covers up around Lucas's shoulders and whispered, "Your daddy loved you so much, sweetheart. He made sure you'd always be safe." In his sleep, he smiled, as if he could hear her, as if he could hear his father's voice in hers, promising that love, real love, would never abandon him. Outside, the wind picked up, rattling the windows of the house that James had fought to secure for his son, but inside, all was quiet and warm and safe. A grandmother and grandson, bound together by loss, but strengthened by the love of a man who'd had the courage to make the hardest choice of his life. The inheritance wasn't really about money or houses or cars. It was about legacy. James had left his son something far more valuable than financial security. He'd left him with people who would love him unconditionally, who would sacrifice for him, who would choose his well-being over their own convenience. Eleanor fell asleep that night with a peaceful heart, knowing that James's final gift had been received and would be treasured. In the morning, there would be pancakes and baseball and laughter. There would be love without conditions, protection without resentment, family without betrayal. It was everything James had wanted for his son. Everything Sophia had been too selfish to provide. Everything Eleanor would spend the rest of her life ensuring Lucas never hunted out. The last will and testament of James Morrison had been more than a legal document. It had been a father's final act of protection, a man's last stand against the forces that threatened to destroy what he held most dear. And in the end, love had won. Love had protected. Love had preserved what mattered most. In death, James had given his son the greatest gift possible, the knowledge that he was worth fighting for, worth protecting, worth choosing over everything else in the world. And Eleanor would make sure Lucas never forgot it.